All right, at my son's practice again, stuck in the truck because COVID, can't go in. So 2 hour sit here, and I'm just thinking about something to share. And I was just thinking back to a story, something that happened to me, and I'm going to tell a story. So, I used to, for about 9 years, I went every fall to Guatemala with the church mission trip, and served there and just trying to do something, and we would go every year. There's routine. We would go to this church on a Sunday morning, and then we'd go to the Guatemala City dump, walk through the dump, and then we would get in the bus and we'd go down to this city, the old capital of Guatemala, which is Antigua, and we'd have a little same place every year. We'd meet, we'd go over the boundaries, go over the plan, tell everybody where to go and then where to meet, and then we would just split. And I had been like 6 times, and I normally did the full 2.5 week, almost 3 week stay, so I knew the system well. So this year that I went, I don't know how long ago it was, I decided I was big stuff and I was just going to do my own thing. So after the meeting, the beginning, we had like 5 hours to just shop and eat and whatever. So I decided to just do my own thing. So we left our little meeting spot, and I don't know if I walked 50 yards, and I was just standing there kind of in this market area, just kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do, where I was going to go, and just enjoying my freedom. That was big bad stuff. Not really, but so I'm standing there, and this younger guy walks up to me, and he has this pamphlet for this massage place, which normally almost every year I would get a massage while I was there because it was really cheap and it passed the time. So I was kind of intrigued by that. But he had this massage pamphlet, and he introduced himself. He could speak English. He actually learned to speak English from watching TV. He was only in his 20s. And so he's like, hey man, this massage place, give you a deal or whatever. And then he started talking to me, and he was a cool guy, and he kind of wanted to take me to this massage place. Well, I didn't have anything else to do, and he was pretty cool, and I thought it was cool to hang out with someone that was local, and he spoke obviously Spanish and English, so I couldn't pass that opportunity up because he could wheel and deal for me. So we just started walking, and I had noticed right away that he had a pretty bad injury on his head, and his head was kind of shaved, and he had a big scar, stitches, things going on here in his head. But anyway, so we're walking, and it was weird because like after about 10-15 minutes, which he was trying to like take me like straight away from everything, I didn't really realize it, and I'm pretty much, I guess, crazy because I wasn't scared. But he started looking at me like real puzzled as we walked, and he kept saying, he would like puzzledly look at me and say, you're a really good guy. And I'm like, I don't know why you're saying that. And we were just kind of goofing around, like walking, and and he said this, I mean, like multiple times. So anyway, I found this market. I was wanting to buy a jersey for my son, so he went in there with me, and he actually kind of helped me barter with the people on buying stuff, which was cool, because I could speak very little Spanish, so it was hard for me. And I'm just pulling out all this money in my wallet because wasn't thinking anything of anything, and he was helping me like barter them, and I think I had the equivalent of like 200 American dollars in my wallet, but they were in quetzales, as they call them, so it was more like 1,800 quetzales, something like that. So anyway, we will keep walking, and then he finally kind of just keeps pulling me away from everything. And we were just having a good old time. I was just talking to him, and telling him what I was doing there, and that my family's back in Columbus, Ohio, and sharing some things. And he just kept stopping, looking at me like, man, you're a really good guy. And I'm like, I don't know why he's doing this. So to shorten the story up, I'll tell you that eventually I said, man, I'd like to buy you dinner. sit down, hang out, have some dinner. So we found our way into McDonald's and bought him a Big Mac, bought him, you know, a meal, whatever, and we sat in this McDonald's and started talking. Well, when we had been walking, he had told me, like, I asked him what happened to his head, and he said he had been on a bike and he had some kind of wreck on his bike and injured his head. And then we sit down, we start talking, you know, and he starts saying, well, actually, I wasn't honest about my, you know, the bike injury. I actually was in a car, and apparently he said I'm a drug dealer, and I was chased by the cops, and a car wrecked and hurt his head. I'm like, okay, it's, you know. So kind of started, you know, kind of asking him about if he had any faith, if he had ever heard the gospel. And then we just kept kind of digging in, and man, things started really coming to light, because he changed the story yet again on me. Because, you know, the story went from getting in a bike accident to being in a car and chased by a cop accident to now we get to this point, and I'm really shortening this story. And this really happened to me, and I know it's crazy, but, you know, you go through life and crazy things happen, and I believe God can use them in good ways. But we keep talking, and man, he starts getting real, like, uneasy, very nervous. Just, you could tell he was very uncomfortable. And I'm like, hey man, are you all right? You know, what's wrong? And he just kind of, oh man, back and forth, you know. And then finally he just, like, gets really seriously uncomfortable, and I'm like, hey, what's going on, man? And he's like, you know, it took me a minute to pry it out of him, but his story changes again. And this time it takes to a whole nother level, because I'm like, hey man, you know, what's going on? And so he finally breaks down. He's like, listen, he's like, I lied to you. He's like, I haven't been honest. He's like, I'm not a drug dealer. It's worse than that. I'm like, well, you know, it doesn't really matter. God loves you no matter what. And I trying to say something. I didn't know what to say. And he finally drops it on me. And oh boy, I was like, oh my. Because he finally says to me, well, the reality is, basically what he said was, I actually am not I'm worse than a drug dealer. He's like, I kill people for a living. I'm like, oh my, you kill people? I'm thinking, okay, now it's all starting to come in my mind, like, I'm actually having a sandwich at McDonald's with an actual assassin, like a real life assassin. I bought an assassin a Big Mac, like, you know. And then I start thinking about, like, it's like kind of like a movie where stuff starts clipping. I'm thinking like me standing there in a marketplace holding my wallet wide open with all this money. I'm thinking about the fact that he pursued me, he took me off the path, and then this whole "you're a really good guy" thing. And I'm starting to think, like, oh my goodness, I think I was in grave danger, and I might still be, because he, I think, had ulterior motives here. But so I just, you know, what do? You're already there. You're sitting at the table with an assassin, and you've already bought him a sandwich. So what do? You do what you can, right? So I'm like, hey man, I said, you know, and this is about the point where I started listening to myself. Now, I don't know if that's normal, okay? I don't know if I'm the only one that's done this, but it's happened to me multiple times throughout my life where I'll be in a situation, like, not necessarily like this, because this is very unique, but where I start talking and yet I'm listening to myself talk. And so I just telling him, you know, it's okay, like, you can, you know, God will still forgive you. And by this point he's literally rubbing his head so hard. And by the way, this injury was like, literally, he almost died because, like, some deal, and it was pretty intense, and I won't get into details of that. But so I'm like, okay, so you kill people for a living. And I start, you know, having a conversation with him about it, like, so, like, how much money do you make doing this? You know, and he's like, oh, and basically told me that he makes on average $150 American dollars to kill somebody. Then I'm really thinking, man, I have more of that in my wallet. Like, I probably was going to be done. You know, if God wasn't protecting me, I might be dead right now. And so he's just getting so troubled and so just, oh my goodness, he was in like some spiritual warfare. And he literally pulls out a picture of this girl. And like I said, this is real. I know. If you don't believe me, it's fine. God knows it's true. He pulls out this picture, and like one of those little school pictures, you know, like ones you put in your wallet. And he sets it down. He's like, I'm like, who's this? It's like this young woman, probably in her 20s. And he's like telling me this is the job he has for that day. Like, while I was talking to him, like, he's going to finish eating the burger that I bought him. And then he's going to proceed to leave there. And I'm like, so you just, how do you know? And he starts telling me, he's like, it's not that hard to do. I'm like, man. He's like, you just walk, literally, this is his words. I'll never forget him. It's been 9 years ago, I think. Maybe 8 years ago. He's like, you literally just walk up and put a bullet in their head. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I asked him how many people he's killed. Like, I got to know, right? I'm already this far into this, so there's no turning back now. So I'm going to get the full scoop. Well, he tells me he's killed. He doesn't know, but he thinks somewhere around 50. 50 people that he's killed for money. And based on the math, I think he's made a total of like $7,000 by killing 50 people. And I'm like, oh man, this is so crazy. And I didn't know half of what to say. Good thing I was not the one talking, because I'm listening to myself. And so I'm like, well, you know, God will forgive you. And he kept saying, no, he can't forgive me. It's not possible. And I'm like, hey man, I believe God will forgive you. And I believe, you know, and he's like, no, I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to spend eternity in hell. That there's no way I can be forgiven. And I'm like, you know, so I was like, so then this is it. This is why I'm telling the story. And I know it's crazy. Okay. And you might not agree with this, but it's fine, because I believe it's true. So I stop him, and he's just a mess. He's sweating, he's rubbing his head, and he's just, oh my goodness, he's a mess. And I stopped and said, listen, listen. I said, so let me play this out. I was like, here I am. I got my Bible on the table. Right there, my Bible's sitting right there. In fact, I had shared a few verses with him. I said, so here I am, and I'm on a mission trip. I said, I left my family, flew to Guatemala, and I'm trying to serve. I shouldn't say serving. I just try to do something. And here I am, and I'm going to leave here. I said, I'm going to try to help you understand the God that I serve. I said, I'm going to leave here, and I'm going to get in a bus with a bunch of other Christians. We're going to go back to a school. We're going to all, you know, I'm going to have my Bible. We're going to go back. We're going to have a little Bible study. We're probably going to sing a couple worship songs. I said, and then eventually I'm going to find my way to bed. And I'm going to lay down to go to sleep. I said, and in the meantime, because he had told me, like, if I don't do this job right now, if I don't kill the girl on this picture, that I'll die. They'll kill me. That's just how it works. No mercy. So I said, so you're going to leave here. I said, and you're going to have a choice on whether to risk your life and run from these people and probably die, according to what he told me. So I said, chances are real good that you're going to leave here and you're going to go and find this girl that's on this picture, and you're going to kill her. You're going to put a bullet in this girl's head and kill her. Like, after we leave McDonald's, you're going to go do this. Unless you decide that you're going to die instead, basically is what he painted the picture of. I said, and then you're going to find your way home, and assuming this all happens, I said, you're probably going to find your way home, and sometime tonight, you're going to lay your head down, and you're going to lay your head on a pillow to go to sleep. And I told him, and I tell you what, I listen to myself, and I think about it all the time, but I believe it. I said, listen, the reality is that when you and I, and I'm looking right at him, he's right here. When we lay our heads on our pillow to go to sleep tonight, that God will love us the same. That is a God worth loving. That is a God worth living for. And actually, better yet, that is a God worth dying for. And it was a powerful moment. Now, I don't know what came of this man. I do know he signed my Bible. He has 4 names. People in Guatemala give themselves 4 names. I know the first one was Gregorio. So in my Bible, and I don't have it with me, but in my Bible, over the cover, under the first page, he signed across this whole page. Gregorio, I think Gregorio or Armando, something. I have his picture in my house, in my office, with his McDonald's cup and his scarred injury on his head. We walked out of McDonald's. I prayed with him. I prayed for his salvation. I gave him a hug. I gave him one of those man shake hugs. And I walked away. And I want you to know that I believe that story helped me understand God's love more than anything else in my life. That God loved us the same in that moment. I believe it. And these nails don't have reverse. I'm out.